The third and last part of question 7 looked at journals and ledgers and also balance day adjustments for expenses. And what it did was it put the focus of the question back onto part A, which was to do with, let's look at this transaction from the perspective of Mar Petroleum. So what happened there was the Mar Petroleum was going to get some cars from MGH Motors and they were going to use them for advertising. But what they did was they actually paid for them up front but didn't get the cars. So from Mar Petroleum's perspective, they started advertising on TV saying win a car, but they hadn't actually used the cars yet to give to the customer. So from Mar Petroleum's perspective, what they had was a debit saying prepaid advertising, which is actually an asset. So they've paid for advertising but haven't used it yet. What then happened was on the 2 days in October, on the 17th and the 24th, they actually got one of those cars on each date and then gave that to a customer for winning the competition. And all that meant was they used up some advertising. So what we did was we decreased the asset prepaid advertising and transferred that to the ledger advertising. So what you were asked to do was actually prepare the prepaid advertising expense ledger from Mar Petroleum at the 31st of October. So the first entry we would have done was a debit to prepaid advertising of $300,000. Our reference would have been bank because we paid for the cars up front. And then at the end of the month we would have transferred out the amount of advertising that we'd used, which in this case was 2 cars out of 5, which was $120,000, and the reference there would have been to the advertising ledger. So a transaction that basically the marks were one for the debit, one for the credit. And if you were asked to do a prepaid advertising transaction where you use some of it, that's not that difficult. So this question was so poorly answered clearly because of the way it was worded, and that's good to have difficult questions on the exam because it sort of sorts out the students who can relate one concept to a multitude of situations. This was an unlikely situation that we'd never seen before, and because of that we can see basically half the state really just didn't understand what it was. That would include a lot of kids who didn't attempt it, but also a lot of kids who did have a go and just couldn't get any marks. At the other end, basically 1 in 4 students did understand it and were able to get 2 out of 2. No examiner's comments on this topic, so if you really want sort of more feedback, go back and watch 7A, B and C for the videos, because really you need to sort of analyse each of these questions as part of the series of 3 rather than individually on its own.